Hello everyone. So we'll start with the class.
Hello. Hello,
So we'll
ma'am.
just look what we discussed in last class. Start with the remaining article. So we were discussing part 3 of the Constitution, the fundamental rights. And there are 6 different categories of rights that we discussed, right? Equality, freedom, exploitation, religion, cultural and educational rights. And also last one is a right that ensures that we are able to enjoy all of these 5 rights that are provided to us. And there is definition of state that is given under article 12 of the constitution, which tells us against whom we can we like we can enforce these rights that are given to us. Then article 13 that tells us about any other law or any other rules, regulations, etc., which is violating provisions of fundamental rights. So what will happen to those provisions? Under Article 13, there were 3 important concepts that we discussed. Firstly, the concept of judicial review, that Supreme Court and High Courts have the power that they can judicially review any order, any legislation, any notification, etc., just to ensure that it is not going against Part 3 of Constitution. The first case where the concept of judicial review was put was Marbury versus Madison, and it was a case of United States. And the concept of judicial review is borrowed from US Constitution to the Constitution of India. And in Indian like cases, L. Chandrakumar versus Union of India was the first case where this, like it was recognized that whatever power is given to high courts and supreme courts, that power is like a basic feature of the constitution. If that power is given under constitution, we cannot take away that power from high courts or either of the supreme court of India. So it was recognized under this case. Then doctrine of severability, it basically means like separation. If we can separate one provision or one part that is violating part 3 of the constitution, then we can do that. Otherwise, the entire act would become void. And it was the case of A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras, where this, like principle was actually applied that only one provision was considered as void. Then doctrine of eclipse, it basically means that whatever provision is violating part 3 of the constitution, it is not totally dead. It is only that part 3 is will overshadow that particular provision. In case later on there are any amendments, the provision might again become applicable if it is not violating part 3 at that moment. So the case was Vikaji Narayan versus State of Madras, where regarding the Berar Motor Vehicles Act, there was one provision which was going against Part 3. It was considered as void for that particular moment, but later on there were changes in fundamental rights and that provision again became applicable. So these were the cases and the principles that are there under Part 3 of Constitution. Then we discuss the first type of right, that is right to equality. It is Articles 14 to 18. Under Article 14, it talks about equality before law, and there are 2 different things mentioned. First is equality before law, and second is equal protection of law. So in case there is any particular law, it should be equally applicable to all the people coming within that particular jurisdiction, and no one is above law, everyone is equally under the law. Equal protection of law would mean if any special treatment or privilege is given, it should be equally given to all, like should be treated alike. There should not be any discrimination between people who are in the same category. Then Article 15, there are 5 different grounds based on which the state shall not discriminate against any citizen. So this right is available only to citizens of India, not to foreigners. Next is Article 16. It is regarding equality of opportunity in matters of public employment. And here 6 grounds are mentioned. Decent is the one new addition apart from the grounds of Article 15. So under these 6 grounds, there should not be any discrimination in terms of public employment or facilities given to people. Also, this is the latest addition that is made regarding maximum of 10% reservation for economically weaker sections of the general category or unreserved category. Next is Article 17 that talks about abolition of untouchability in any form or in any practices. And also, in order to give power to this particular article, we have several other legislations, right? Protection of Civil Rights Act regarding manual scavengers also. We have multiple legislations that ensures that untouchability as a practice is prohibited. Next is Article 18. It basically says that apart from military and academic designations, any other titles will not be allowed, whether it is given by Indian government or foreign. So some of the examples would be Padma Vibhushan, Padma Bhushan, Padma Shri, Field Marshal, General, Major General, Brigadier, Captain. So all these are allowed. Other than that, no other title would be allowed, just in order to ensure that there is no sort of, like discrimination, that one person is superior, he is holding some special titles given by the government or other things like that. So in order to ensure that everyone feels that they are equal, these special titles and all whatever was prevailing before constitution came, those should be abolished, just in order to ensure there is equality amongst people of India. Now these are some of the questions that we will solve today. So what would be the answer for first question? Article 1 declares India as
quasi-federal.
Anyone else? What would be the answer?
Union of the states.
It is Union of the States. So we already studied this, right? Article 1, like part 1, we discussed 2 classes before. So it declares India as a union of states. And what are these states? It is mentioned under which schedule? Which schedule mentions the, like names of states, their jurisdictions and all of that?
Schedule 1?
Yeah, it is Schedule 1 that gives us a list of states and union territories that we have, and also their territorial jurisdictions. And also, in order to make any changes in this particular first schedule, what we do not need is that we do not need to follow the procedure of Article 368. It can be amended by the Parliament if there are any changes made, right? Because 2 states are made from 1 state, 2 states are combined, whatever it is, Parliament can amend that particular thing. They don't need to follow the provisions of Article 368. Next one. Second one, what would be the answer?
November 26, 1946.
So it says the date when Constituent Assembly met for the first time. So it is the first one, 9th December 1946, when Constituent Assembly met for the first time.
Okay.
Next one.
Cabinet Mission Plan.
Yeah, it is Cabinet Mission Plan A. So what is this Cabinet Mission Plan? So basically what happened, like British was ruling us. So what happens at one moment, if all the powers are given to Indian people, there might be some sort of, like problems and confusion. So it basically discussed how powers would be, like transferred from British to Indian leaders. So it is basically that, and under this only Constituent Assembly was formed. And then they constituted various committees, and then reports were submitted, and finally Constitution came into force. Next one. Which of the following is true? Which one is true?
Committee with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as its chairman.
Yeah, it was formulation. Drafting Constitution. It was formulation by drafting committee with B.R. Ambedkar as chairman. Next one.
Article 12.
Article 12. Yeah, it is Article 12 that defines the term state. Next one. What is true? Regarding fundamental rights that are guaranteed to Indian citizens. What is true?
Option B.
Option B says fundamental rights are absolute but are subject to certain qualifications and restrictions. Anyone else? What would be the answer? Anyone else? So B says what? Fundamental rights are absolute but are subject to certain qualifications or restrictions. So if it is subject to certain qualifications and restrictions, it cannot be absolute, right? If there are certain restrictions to it, it cannot be absolute. Third one says fundamental rights are not absolute and are not subject to restrictions. Again, if there are no restrictions, it cannot be not absolute. It will be absolute, right? So first one is the correct answer. Fundamental rights are not absolute. Why? Because they are subject to certain qualifications and restrictions. So if they are subject to restrictions, they cannot be absolute. So the first one would be correct here. Fundamental rights are not absolute, but they are subject to certain qualifications and restrictions. So first type of right is clear, right? For any questions on that part, right to equality?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we will move to the next type of right, that is right to freedom. So which all articles talk about right to freedom?
Article 19(1)(a) and 19(2), ma'am. Subclause 2.
Article 19, and also there are some other articles also, right? What are these?
Yes.
Apart from Article 19, which all other articles give us some type of freedom? So it is Articles 19 to 22. Articles 19 to 22. Article 19 is talking about what? It is talking about protection of certain rights regarding freedom of speech, etc. So freedom of speech, etc. means it is not only restricted to freedom of speech or any particular area. It may be various, like various things that can be included over here. So it basically means under Article 19, we have certain types of rights that are given to citizens of India. Again, these rights are applicable to citizens of India. All citizens shall have the right to what all rights we are given? Speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a), freedom to assemble peacefully without arms, freedom to form associations or unions, including formation of cooperative societies, that is also provided. Then freedom to move freely throughout the territory of India, freedom to reside and settle in any part of the territory of India. So these are some of the rights that are given to us. Now, freedom to assemble peacefully freedom to assemble peacefully without arms. So this right is given, that we have the right to assemble peacefully, but this should be without arms. Otherwise, it will become an offense, right? Unlawful assembly. Otherwise, it will become the offense of unlawful assembly under section 141 of IPC. So this right is given only in terms of assembling without arms. Then freedom of speech and expression is given, freedom to form any sort of associations, unions, cooperative societies. So similarly, we have the Trade Unions Act, right? That trade unions would be formed, the union representative will represent wishes of the workers there. Then freedom to form associations, then move freely throughout the territory of India. So we are free to move in any part of India and reside and settle in any part of India, to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or business. So we are free to move throughout the territory of India, but there might be certain restrictions, like put on this particular right. What is it? That otherwise we are free to go in any place within India, right? But there might be certain places, like for example, Arunachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir also, I think some permit is needed, is it? So there might be certain places or certain territories where even Indians would need, right? Indian citizens would need a special permit. For example, in order to enter Arunachal Pradesh, we as Indian citizens, we also would need a certain type of permit, and foreigners would need, apart from the permit, they would also need some additional clearances. So what happens? This particular right is given, but there might be certain places where an exception would be, applied. Similarly, reside and settle in any part of territory. There are also some restrictions might be there. For example, in Jammu and Kashmir, other people were not allowed to buy cloth. In Meghalaya, other people from other states are not allowed to buy cloth. So there might be certain restrictions on certain parts of the country, but otherwise this rule would be applicable to any other place. So this is a right that was given, right to acquire, hold and dispose of property. It was also a fundamental right, but it was removed by the 44th Amendment Act, and it was made only a constitutional right under Article 300A of the Constitution. So 19 clause 1 is providing for these different types of freedoms regarding to different areas or different matters. And Article 19 clause 2, what it is saying is that it is talking about certain type of restrictions that may be put on these rights that we have. That means these rights again are not absolute, but there might be certain restrictions, and these restrictions should be what? It may be imposed on the ground of protection of sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency, morality, in relation to contempt of court, defamation or incitement to an offense. So there might be these grounds based on which these rights can also be restricted, even though they are given to us. For example, public order, security of the state. On these grounds, what happens is that at present restrictions are made, right? That people cannot just move to any other state, cannot just travel to any other state. They might need some permit, they might need some permission from government. Also, they would need to follow certain procedures that the authorities would ask them to do. So what happens is that these rights are given, but based on the situation, based on the current situation, there might be certain restrictions put on these rights on these grounds. Okay, next is nothing in the side effect the operation of. So again, it says that even though these rights are given, it would not affect the operation of any existing law to impose, prevent state from making or imposing any reasonable restriction. So this again would mean that even though these rights are given, even in normal times, we would need a special permit to enter Arunachal Pradesh. We cannot buy property in Meghalaya even in normal times. So this is what it means, that even though under constitution these rights are given to general, like all the citizens of India, there might be certain other laws that is imposing some reasonable restrictions on these grounds. So those laws would also be valid. Again, to practice any profession or any occupation, trade or business, etc., this right is given to us, but what happens is that there might be some other conditions put by government or put by authorities. For example, in order to start practicing law, we just need an LLB degree, right? But what Bar Council has done is that we need to get license in order to start our practice. So that means what? It is like an additional condition that we need to fulfill in order to start practicing in courts. So that would not be like a violation of this particular provision. Why? Because that is like an additional qualification that the competent authorities are asking for. So Bar Council of India is free to do that. Regarding any other profession also, there might be certain restrictions. Regarding some trade or businesses, we would need a permission from government. We would need permission in order to start business on a particular area also. For example, for petrol pump, we cannot just we need some permission. For alcohol shops, we would need permission. So what happens is that there might be additional, like legislations or additional authorities who are putting some additional conditions, but it would not be a violation of Article 19 of the Constitution, even if it is providing us this right. So same only, it is basically saying that states can, like make some other laws, and all other existing laws that are providing some restrictions or putting some additional conditions would not be like invalid because of this provision. So similarly, there might be certain other things that may be to carry on occupation controlled by state, any trade, business, etc., whether exclusion. So this particular ground was mentioned. We discussed, right, in the other case that there was one particular act which was restricting private individuals or private entities from entering into the business of motor transport. So this act was challenged on the ground that it is violating Part 3 of the Constitution, and doctrine of eclipse was applied on that ground. But later on, this addition was made in the Constitution that there might be certain trade, businesses, industries or services where government can, control it entirely in exclusion of citizens or in exclusion of private bodies. So government is having the power. Similarly, it is done with regard to electricity, that we see only government providing for that service, right? Only state government is providing for that service. There is no private entity or private individual who is providing for electricity. So that is a type of, like business or area where government is having monopoly. Only state government can provide that service. Article 19, anyone, any questions? Is it clear? Any doubts? Article 19?
No, ma'am.
So Article 19 is not specific to any area or anything, but it is providing for different types of rights relating to like different areas or different matters. And these rights are not absolute. They may be restricted on the grounds mentioned under Article 19 Clause 2. And also, like, states are free to make their own laws and regulations in order to put like additional conditions and everything. And the government is free to decide for any particular trade, business, industry or service that they want to control that particular area of business entirely to the exclusion of individuals or private bodies. So next right that we have is regarding protection in respect of conviction for offences. So the previous right was applicable to whom? All the citizens of India. But this right is applicable for people who are convicted of some offense. So for protection of those people only, this particular right is given, and it would be applicable to those people. Now, what rights are given? There are three different sub-clauses mentioned. Firstly, it says protection in respect of conviction for offences. Firstly, it says no person shall be convicted of an offence except for what? Violation of law in force at the time of commission of the act charged as an offence, nor be subject to a penalty greater than that which might have been inflicted under the law in force at the time of commission of the offence. So the main words I have made it bold. So what is the main idea behind this is that one person, right, when a person is convicted, if A is convicted of an offense, for example, acid attack. So it is a case is filed that A has committed the offense of acid attack. Now, like before, a few years before, acid attack was not even recognized as a crime. There was no crime called as acid attack. It was only considered as a type of grievous harm caused to a person. Only referred to as a type of grievous harm. So there was no concept of acid attack before until few years before. So what happens now if A has committed this particular offense of throwing acid on someone and a case is filed? After that, what happens is that after that acid attack was recognized as a separate offense, right? For example, that Chapak movie you must have seen, right? What happened in that particular movie? That there was this act of acid attack committed against Lakshmi. But what happened at that time, acid attack was not even recognized as a separate crime or as a type of offense. So in that particular case, what happens is that the person can only be punished for causing grievous harm. Now the punishment for grievous harm is lesser than the type acid attack. So what happens if when A committed this offense of throwing acid on someone, acid attack was not even a crime. Later on, it was made a crime. What it cannot be done is that he cannot be charged for the offense of acid attack. He can be charged only for causing grievous harm. And also what happens is that he cannot be punishment for grievous harm only. So even if punishment for acid attack is more than grievous harm, he cannot be given that punishment. Why? Because when he committed the act, it was not even recognized as a separate offense. This particular punishment was not even there. So this is what it means, that no person shall be convicted of an offense except for violation of a law which was at that time applicable when he committed that particular act. Whatever laws were applicable, only that we can apply to the person. And also we cannot give him a penalty greater than what was applicable at that moment. So if at that moment the punishment of, for example, 3 years or 5 years was there, we cannot give him a punishment of 7 years or life imprisonment. Why? Because it would violate the provisions of Article 20 Clause 1. So if a person has committed an offense, he can be given a punishment which is applicable at that moment, and he can be made liable for an offense which was considered an offense at that particular moment only. So we cannot make him liable for something which was not a crime at that moment, or we cannot give him a higher punishment than what is applicable at that moment. Is this point clear? Any doubts? Any doubts on the first point?
No.
So now another example would be what? So acid attack, we have understood, right, that it was not a crime at one point of time, so that punishment cannot be given. A person cannot be charged for acid attack, but he can only be given punishment for grievous hurt, and that punishment only can be given. Similar example would be Nirbhaya case, right? So Nirbhaya gang rape case. In that case, what happened? After this particular case, there were some changes made in criminal law. Before this, what happened is that any child under 18 years. So before that, what happened? Anyone under 18 years committing a crime would be tried under the Juvenile Justice Act. But before Nirbhaya, after Nirbhaya gang rape case, what happened? There were some changes made in the criminal law, and it was said that if a crime is committed by someone who is between the age of 16 to 18 years, what we will do is that court will see whether the person is mature enough to understand the type of crime, its consequences or not. So what they will do is that they would check the maturity of the person. In case it is committed by a child between 16 to 18 years, in case it is found that the person was, mature enough, then he would not be tried under Juvenile Justice Act, but he will have to be tried under the Indian Penal Code, right? He would face the normal procedure only. He would not face the procedure under Juvenile Justice Act. But this particular change was done after the Nirbhaya gang rape case only. So the person who was, one juvenile who was accused of this particular crime, we cannot see his maturity. Why? Because when he committed this act, at that time, this particular, provision was not even there in our legal system. So the person would be tried under Juvenile Justice Act only, irrespective of the fact that he was mature enough to understand the type of crime that he is committing. So that means what? We cannot give a punishment which was not applicable at that moment. Similarly, we cannot make a person liable for an offense which was not considered as an offense at that particular point of time. Okay, so next is no person shall be prosecuted or punished for the same offense more than twice. So this is like very simple, right? That only once the person can be prosecuted and punished. If a person has committed the offense of theft, he should be punished only once for that offense. We cannot be like 2-3 times we are punishing him for the same type of offense. It can be only once. But obviously there are provisions that provisions for appeal and all, but punishment should be only once. No person accused of an offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. So this is a provision regarding self-incrimination. That a person is what? The person cannot be compelled to be a witness against himself because it would affect his, right. So this is like a fundamental right that is given under Article 20, Clause 3 of the Constitution. Similarly, there is a concept of privileged communication, right? So what is privileged communication? Anyone remembers privileged communication under Evidence Act? Under privileged communication, what happens? There are certain types of communications which are considered as privileged communication. For example, a communication between husband and wife, a communication between a lawyer and his client. So what happens? Even if, for example, a person is under custody of police officers and he is charged for an offense, what happens is that he will have a right to have communication with his lawyer. There would be privacy in that. Police officers cannot be like, we would also sit with you and listen what all discussions you are having with your lawyer. So police officers cannot do that. Similarly, communications between husband and wife would also come under privileged communication. So these rights are given to people who are convicted of an offense. There are 3 grounds, 3 types of rights that are given. Firstly, we cannot give punishment more than what is mentioned. We cannot make a person liable for an act which was not considered an offense at that moment. We cannot, like prosecute or punish a person for more than once for the same crime. And also a person cannot be compelled to be a witness against himself. So for example, now not wearing a mask is like an offense, right? Fine would be imposed. So that was not a crime few weeks before. So we cannot say that even when, like corona was there, people, like this particular person was roaming around without wearing a mask. So we should, like impose fine on him. Why we cannot do that is because it was not a crime at that moment itself. So these are the 3 rights that we have. Is it clear? So these are the 3 different types of rights that are given to us under Article 20 of the Constitution, that firstly say whatever law is applicable, whatever punishment is mentioned, only that can be given. Only one time punishment would be given for one single offense. But obviously, if the person has committed the same type of offense 2 times, right? The person has committed theft 2 times. The person has committed the offense of cheating 2 times. That punishment would be given for, like 2 different offenses. But for one single offense, there can be only one single punishment given. And also the person cannot be compelled to be a witness against himself. This is a right that is given to the convicted persons. And also there is a concept of privileged communication that is given to people. That communication between husband and wife, communication between lawyer and client, so those would be considered as a privileged communication. Is this part clear, Article 20? Anyone, any questions? Any doubts, Article 20? If anything is not clear, you can let me know. Is it clear?
Yes, it's clear. No doubts.
So these are the 3 different rights that we are getting under Article 20. Now the most important one, Article 21. So Article 21 is like a very simple article that we have, right? Like only one sentence is there. But what happens is that courts have interpreted this particular article and they have included certain other rights, certain other things also within the scope of Article 21. So even though it looks like it's a very simple and very, like basic article, but there are many other things which are also included by various, like court judgments, and those things are also included under this particular right. So what is Article 21? Article 21 is regarding protection of life and personal liberty. The provision says, no person shall be deprived of his life. So no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. Now this is very important, what is called as procedure established by law. Now what this means is that usually we have a right to life and also right to personal liberty. So this right is given to us, but again this right is not absolute. Even though this right is given to us, what it is that this right may be taken away. How it may be taken away? It may be taken away by a procedure established by law. Now, what is this procedure established by law? It may be any example of procedure established by law that you can give. What would be procedure established by law under which we can take away this right of life and personal liberty from someone? Can anyone say procedure established by law?
Ma'am, capital punishment?
Yeah, it would be an example of capital punishment also. Right. So what happens is that usually it is a like right that we are being given, but if a person commits any rarest of rare cases and court decides to give capital punishment, it can do so. How it can do? It would be a procedure established by law. Under IPC, if there is a provision for providing death penalty, then we can say that the particular this right is taken away from the person. How? It is done by a procedure established by law. Under a certain law, we are already having a provision of taking away this particular right. So what we can do is that we can take away this particular right from people, and it would not be a violation of the like Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Okay, so now what happens under Constitution? It's like very one line basic simple provision, right to life and personal liberty, and not except according to procedure established by law. But now what is this life and personal liberty? Because life might mean just like animal existence, just fulfilling the basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter, and just being like alive. It might mean that also, right? Just being alive is also like right to life. But courts have said that it is not only mere animal existence. It is not just about the basic human needs that we have of food, clothing, and shelter, but it may include various other things that are needed for living our life to the fullest. So there are some, like cases, 3-4 cases that we will discuss under Article 21. So Menaka Gandhi versus Union of India. This is like a first case where Supreme Court gave a wide interpretation of this particular article. Wide interpretation as in they included various other things also under the concept of protection of life and personal liberty. So what this case was all about, basically we would look into the background, okay? What it is that under the Passport Act, there is a certain provision, okay? Under the Passport Act, there is a certain provision under Article 10.3c, okay? Under Article 10.3c and 10.5, there is a certain provision where what happens is that passport authorities are allowed to do what? To impound. That means seizing any sort of, like documents by an authority and to keep it under their custody. So that means under this particular act, passport authorities are given a right to seize someone's passport. On what ground? In the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India. In the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, security of India, friendly relations of India, or for the betterment of general public. So these are some of the grounds that are mentioned, and Passport Act says that under these grounds, passport authorities are allowed to seize someone's passport if it is found that the person's like behavior or conduct is a threat to any of these grounds. So usually what happens is that they should communicate the reasons. So if someone's passport, right, for example, if there is a person called A, he is having a passport and his passport is like seized by the passport authorities. So what happens usually in such cases, if A's passport is seized, what happens usually is that he should be informed about the reasons. So he should be informed that what he has done, what all things he has done wrong because of which his passport is seized by the authorities. So usually he should be informed why his passport has been seized. But there might be certain cases where passport authorities might feel that it is better that we do not disclose the reasons why, because of interest of general public. So usually it is said that you should inform about the reasons, what the person has done wrong because of which you are seizing his or her passport. But there might be certain exceptions also. There might be certain exceptions also where authorities may decide not to disclose the reasons. Now what happened in this particular case? So we understood, right, that under Passport Act, passport authorities are given the right to seize someone's passport and to keep it under their custody if it is found that the person's behavior, activities or actions are a threat on any of these grounds. Now what happened in this particular case is that Menka Gandhi, she is a journalist by profession, and what happened is that in 1977, passport authorities sent her a letter that you should submit your passport within some, I think 7 days time was given, that within 7 days you need to hand over your passport to us. But they did not mention the reasons why they were asking for her passport, but they just submitted the letter to her. So after receiving that particular notice, what she did is that she wrote back to the passport authorities and she told them, like disclose the grounds or reasons why you want to seize my passport. But the authorities refused to disclose the reasons, and they said that it is in interest of general public that we cannot disclose the reasons, but you need to hand over your passport to us within the prescribed time frame. So what she did is that she filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court under Article 32, and she said that whatever passport authorities have done, like seizing my passport without letting me know about the reasons and all, it is a violation of Article 14, because it is a protection against arbitrary action of authorities. There is no protection, right? There should be some sort of protection given. So it is a violation of Article 14. It is a violation of Article 21. I have a right to life and personal liberty. It is hampering my personal liberty that the authorities are seizing my passport without informing the grounds. It is also a violation of Article 19(1)(a) that gives me a right to, this is speech and expression, right? So this is giving me a right to speech and expression. It is also violating Article 19 clause 1 clause A. Also it is violating Article 19(1)(g) of the Constitution. Why? Because right to freedom of movement I have. So how it is violating Article 19(1)(a)? Because if I have a right to speech and expression, I have also the right to know, right? So they should inform me the reasons why they want to seize my passport. So it was said that it is violating a lot of articles under the Constitution, and whatever the authorities have done, it is not, like the good thing to do. It is violating the provisions of Constitution. So in this case, what the court did is that So what court said is that under Article 21, what right we have the right to what? Life and personal liberty. But again, this right to life and personal liberty is subject to what? It is subject to procedure established by law. That means under a certain procedure established by law, this right may be taken away. So it was said that the main purpose of court is what? The court's purpose is to check whether that particular procedure established by law is suffering any, like unreasonableness or arbitrariness. If the procedure is just, fair and reasonable, then there is no harm in taking away right of a certain person. So the court said that the main purpose of us is to check whether it is violating the provisions of Constitution is not, whether that particular procedure is just, fair and reasonable or not. If it is a proper procedure, then it is okay even if someone's right has been violated. So what court said basically is that court gave a broader interpretation to Article 21, and it said is that so it said that this particular provision under which passport authorities decided to seize Menka Gandhi's passport is not violating Article 21, Article 19, etc. or Article 14. Why? Because they have, mentioned the reasons. They have given her the freedom to go to the Supreme Court and then, fight a case also. So that means what? The authorities, whatever they have done is not like against the constitution. Menka Gandhi was still having a right to go to the court and challenge that particular decision. So court basically says that, okay, fine, right to, it is a fundamental right, but if the procedure is a proper procedure, we cannot do anything about it. If it is a valid procedure, authorities are free to do it. So it was also, court also suggested that whenever you are, sending any notice regarding seizing of passport, you should try to mention the reasons if it is possible. So wherever possible, in order to avoid conflict, you should try to mention the reasons. But in some cases, if it is not possible to mention the reasons, like interest of general public is not like a vague concept. It is a proper ground only, but authorities should try their best to mention the reasons. If they are not able to do that, then also it is fine, because it is like a proper procedure established under law, which can even be challenged under the Supreme Court or High Court. So it was said that it is like a proper procedure only that they are following. But court also recognized that under Article 21, what right we have is we have the right to travel abroad. So Supreme Court basically gave a wider interpretation of this particular article and recognized that right to travel abroad is also a part of Article 21 of the Constitution. Is the case clear? Any doubt? Any doubt on any part of this case? Any question on any part of this case?
No questions.
So this is basically a case that recognized for the first time that right to travel abroad is also included under the scope of Article 21. Next is Mohini Jain versus State of Karnataka. This case for the first time recognized that right to education is also included under Article 21. Why this is included? For example, if we have a right to life and personal liberty, it does not just mean having, animal existence, just being alive. It also includes certain other things that we need, certain other rights or facilities that we need in order to, do the maximum out of this life that we are being given. So in this case, what happened is that Mohini Jain, she was a medical aspirant and she filed a case in Supreme Court of India challenging a notification which was issued by Government of Karnataka that permitted private medical colleges in India to charge like heavy tuition fees from their students. So in this particular case, she challenged that particular notification of Government of Karnataka, saying that if it would be a violation of right to education of the common people because they are charging very heavy tuition fees from the medical students. In this particular case, the main question that the Supreme Court addressed is whether right to education is guaranteed to citizens of India under Constitution or not. So they mainly put up this question that whether this right to education that this particular case has raised is guaranteed to citizens of India or not. So in this case, they observed that life and personal liberty under Article 21 of Constitution automatically would include some other rights also. So it cannot be only life and personal liberty. If we need to live our life, we would need certain other rights also, right? In order to maintain ourselves, in order to ensure that we are living this life to the fullest, we would also need certain other rights. And it was said that even if it is only mentioned life and personal liberty, there are certain other things also which are automatically included in it, like full development of our personality, whatever is necessary. for full development of our personality, those things can also be included in it. So even though they are not specifically mentioned in part 3, those would be also included. So education was also considered as like one of the factors for overall development of individual, and it was recognized that right to education is also an integrated part of Article 21 of the Constitution. So it is the case of Mohini Jain versus State of Karnataka regarding right to education, where court said that right to life and personal liberty does not only mean life and personal liberty. There might be certain other things which we need in order to enjoy this life and for full development of human personality, so that we can lead this life normally. So these rights were also recognized. Next case is Husainara Khatun versus Home Secretary, State of Bihar. In this case, what right was recognized? In this case, right to speedy trial was recognized. What happens? For example, a case is filed against a person. He is under trial, he is under custody, right? What happens is that if he is under custody, that particular person's right to life and personal liberty is also hampered if he is not getting speedy trial and on time trial. If this particular person is kept under custody for a very long time without trial, without anything, then his right is also violated. So in this particular case, what happened? There was one advocate. She filed a case in 1978. What she did is that she prepared a list, okay, about the under trial prisoners in Bihar jail. So she made a list of all the people, mentioning whether it is like a severe crime or a minor offense, and she mentioned for like how many years, how many months they are under custody without any trial or any other things. They are simply there waiting for their trial in Bihar jail. So she made a list of those prisoners, and then she moved to the court, and this case was basically filed before Supreme Court regarding one particular prisoner whose name was Husainara Khatun. So this case is known as Husainara Khatun versus State of Bihar. So in this case, what Supreme Court realized after reading that particular document, they realized that actually there was a huge delay in terms of trial of the prisoners in Bihar jail. So the court ordered release of 40,000 prisoners from the jail in this particular case. So why release was allowed is because whatever crime they has committed, right? For example, a person has committed an offense which is punishable with maximum of 1 year imprisonment. But waiting for trial only, maybe the person has spent like 2 years in jail. So what court said is that there is no use for this particular person for waiting for more time for trial. The person has already served his maximum punishment waiting for trial itself. So the court said that those people should be released from jail, and also it was considered that under Article 21, because they have already served the maximum term for the offense for which they are being convicted. So in this particular case, right to speedy trial was also recognized as a part of Article 21, and it was said that we are if this particular right is not given to the convicted people, then it basically means that their right to life and personal liberty has been affected, because we do not know whether the person would be found guilty or not. But the person has already served the maximum term of punishment for that particular offense. Even then, he is waiting for trial. So that obviously means that it is a violation of our right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 of the Constitution. So this is about Husainara Khatun case. Next is Olga Tellis versus Bombay Municipal Corporation case. So this is the last case that we will discuss under Article 21. In this particular case, what right was recognized? It was recognized that right to livelihood is also included under Article 21 of the Constitution. So what happened in this case basically is that the Chief Minister of Maharashtra in that particular time, he made an order for eviction of slum dwellers and pavement dwellers out of Bombay and to deport them to their original places. So the Chief Minister made an order and Bombay Municipal Corporation issued a notification under Bombay Municipal Corporation Act regarding eviction of the slum dwellers and pavement dwellers. So basically what happened is that a case was filed that, like they also have a right to life. If they are evicted from the, like those pavements or slums, so what happens is that their right to life would be affected. So a case was filed. So court held that right to life in Article 21 of the Constitution, it also includes right to livelihood. But right to livelihood was not absolute, and deprivation of right to livelihood could occur if there was just and fair procedure. So basically what happened is that in this particular case, it was said that if there is any sort of eviction that takes place in slums or pavements, what happens is that the right of these dwellers would be affected, and they also have a right to life and personal liberty. So what court said is that it is not possible, like for every single eviction we are providing, like resettlement options for the people. There might be certain cases where it can be provided, but there might be certain cases where it cannot be provided. Also, one question was raised whether these dwellers are, committing the offense of trespass, right? Criminal trespass. So court said that it is not a case of criminal trespass. Why? Because they are not staying in those pavements or slum areas themselves. They are, bound under compulsion. Because of that only they are doing. So government's action should be reasonable. If government is carrying forward those evictions under a reasonable procedure, then what happens is that we cannot say that it is violating the provisions of Constitution. So are the cases clear? Anyone, any doubts on the cases part? These 4 cases we discussed regarding Article 21. How the scope of Article 21 was widened by the Supreme Court in various courts, like court decisions, right? So you can go through these cases once for yourself, then it will be, more clear that what all things are included. So now we have just mentioned 4 cases, right? But there are multiple cases where many other things are also, recognized to be a part of Article 21. So some of them would be like right to go abroad, right to privacy, right against solitary confinement, then right against handcuffing. So handcuffing is also an important matter. Previously, handcuffing was allowed. But then later on, it was said that it is a violation of personal liberty. So handcuffing should not be, permitted unless and until it's a situation where there is, multiple examples where the person has tried to escape or something like that. Only in such cases, handcuffing may be allowed, but otherwise it should not be like a common practice. It should not be practiced normally. Again, right against custodial death, right against public hanging. So public hanging is also, not allowed. Why? Because it is said that it's also a violation of right to life and personal liberty. Even the person is given that punishment, until the moment he dies, he has this particular right. So what happens is that this right should be given to him. Then again, right to free water, right to air, right to pollution-free environment, protection of under trial prisoners, then right of child regarding full development of his personality, protection of cultural heritage, maintenance of public health, improvement of means of communication, human condition. So there are many other things which are also included under Article 21 of the Constitution. So it does not mean only life and personal liberty. There are many other things also which are included. So is Article 21 clear? Any doubts on the cases or the provisions? Anyone, any question on this? If you
No
have any-
questions.
Okay. Fine. So this is what Article 21 is all about, that even though it's a very simple one-line provision mentioning only two things, life and personal liberty, it actually includes what? It actually includes a lot of other things also that are mentioned by various courts' decisions. So there are many cases that you would find regarding Article 21 that has widened the provision. So these are like some of the important cases that I have mentioned over here. So now next right that is given is Article 21A of the Constitution. What is Article 21A? It is a right to education. So this particular right, when we see 21A, that means it was originally not there in the Constitution, right? Later on it was inserted. So it was inserted after Article 21. So it is Article 21A, but originally this provision was not there in Constitution. So what is Article 21A? It is providing us with the right to education. What is right to education? It says the state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years in such manner as the state may by law determine. That means free and compulsory education was given as a fundamental right to children between 6 to 14 years of age, and it was like the state government was given that particular right, that they would decide under any particular law how that education should be given. For example, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan that we have, right, that is an example of it. They would decide how free and compulsory education would be given, how midday meal would be given, how free books would be given, textbooks would be given to students, free uniform or other needs would be, like fulfilled by that particular law. So this particular provision was inserted by Constitutional Amendment, which one? 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002. So try to remember the Constitutional Amendment. It was in 2002 only that right to education was made a part of fundamental rights under Article 21A. Now what happens is that this provision, it basically means that it is a, like a right that has been given and state would make some laws regarding this. Now Constitution is just making the provision. It is not giving in detail how the things would operate. So we would need a certain law, right? So the law that we have regarding this is Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009. So this is the legislation that we have regarding free and compulsory education of the year 2009. That means under 86th Amendment in the year 2002, this right was inserted under Constitution, and Constitution specifically said, like they just mentioned the ground, right, that it is 6 to 14 years of children. They would be given what? Free and compulsory education, but the things would be decided by state by framing a law. So the law was made in 2009. It is Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act, and under this particular right, detailed provisions would be mentioned. So there are some provisions regarding, for example, there should be a school in a distance of some 1 or 3 kilometers, so that children are not traveling like too far for their education. They can go to a nearby school and then get education. And also what happens is that it is not just the fundamental right of the children, but also there is a fundamental duty imposed on parents that they are sending their kids to school. They are not forced to go into any sort of, like child labor or any other practices. They are sent to schools. So there are various other provisions also which are mentioned under this particular act. specifically mentioning how education would be provided, what would be the criteria, what would be the student-teacher ratio, for how many students, how many teachers are needed, and all the other things, right? For the school also, what all conditions are to be satisfied, fulfilled. So all these provisions are mentioned under the Act of 2009. The right, like this is like a fundamental right that is given under Part 3, and also there is a fundamental duty imposed on parents under Article 51A(k). Under this particular, like fundamental duty, it is given as a duty on parents or guardians that they should send their kids or children to for like free and compulsory education. So now this duty is not just restricted to parents, but it also goes to guardians. Guardians means they may not be the, like mother and father of the child. They may be her, like some uncle, aunts, under whose custody the child is. That person would be a guardian. So it may be sisters, brothers, whoever it is. Under whoever's custody a child of 6 to 14 years is there, they should ensure that the kid is going for his, like free and compulsory education, and then getting education under this particular provision. So this is the right that is given under Article 21A. So you should remember the constitutional amendment under which it was made, and also relating to this particular fundamental right, we have a fundamental duty. Just to ensure, because children would not know that they are having something called as a fundamental duty, they should go to schools and get education and all of that, right? It is whom? It is the elderly members of the family, parents or guardians only, who would know that they should, educate their children and all of that. So this is also inserted as a fundamental duty under Article 51A clause K, that parents or guardians should send their kids for what? For free and compulsory education to any like nearby schools. So now the last type of freedom that is given under Part 3 of the Constitution is what? It is Article 22 of the Constitution. So what is Article 22? It is protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. So previously we discussed regarding a right that is given to people who are convicted of a certain offense, and this is given regarding what? Regarding arrest and detention. So these rights that are mentioned under this particular part, right? These would be what? That these would be applicable only in terms of people who are arrested or detained for a certain case under a certain matter. So what are these rights that are given? Firstly, no person who is arrested shall be detained. So firstly, what happens is that if a person is arrested or if a person is, detained under a custody of some police officer or someone, he should be informed about the grounds. That means, for example, police officer suddenly comes and, they want to arrest a certain person. So they should let the person know the reasons for the arrest. They should let the person know that the person has committed maybe the offense of theft, murder, or whatever it is because of which he has been arrested. So police officers should let the person know regarding the grounds of such arrest. And also what will happen is that the person should be given a right to consult and to be defended by a legal practitioner of his choice. So it does not mean that only because the person is arrested, police officers would decide whether he would get the chance of, speaking to a lawyer, hiring a lawyer or not. It is a right, fundamental right that is given under Article 22. That the person should be informed about the grounds for his arrest, under what act, what provision, what section, for which offense he has been arrested, and also he should have the right to consult and be defended by a lawyer of his choice. So this is the first type of right that is given to whom? To people who are being arrested or convicted of a certain offense. That what right he would get? The person should be informed why he has been arrested. The person should have the right to consult and also be defended by a legal practitioner. So this is the first type of right that we have. So second right that we have is regarding, so second right that we have is every person who is arrested or detained shall be, so this we all know, right, that it is within 24 hours that the person should be produced before the nearest magistrate. And this 24 hours, how this time would be calculated? It would be excluding the time that is necessary for the journey. So there might be some roads might be blocked, some traffic jam might be there, that while, you know, like traveling to the nearest magistrate only it took like few hours, like 4 or 5 hours. So there might be a certain case like that. So it is said that the time of journey is excluded, but otherwise from the time of arrest and detention, within 24 hours, the person should be produced before the nearest magistrate, and this is like a fundamental right that is guaranteed under this particular Article 22. And next, what it says, for example, now, starting off this article, what it says, no person, every person. Now that means what? This right is not, you know, like limited to citizens of India only. This right may even be applicable to some foreigners also, right? So whenever you see no person, every person, all persons, so whenever you see these terms, that means that particular right is available to citizens as well as non-citizens. So this particular right also is available even to non-citizens also, right? Even to foreigners it is applicable. So under clause 3, what it mentions is that there is an exception to whom this right may not be applicable. So it says nothing in clause 1 and 2 shall apply. Number 1, to a person who for the time being is an enemy alien, and to any person who is arrested or detained under any sort of preventive detention law. So there might be certain, you know, like this right may not be applicable to a person who is arrested under a preventive detention law. If the act is specifically making some provisions, the person may not be given this particular right. And also, you know, like foreigner coming from an enemy state, to that person this right may not be given. For example, one, you know, like a person from maybe Pakistan or China, where, you know, like India is not in good terms with, if a person from those you know, like states comes to India and the person is arrested on a certain ground, then these rights may not be given. So the person may not be able to ask for these rights, even though these rights are given to like foreigners as well. So this is like an exception that is made to this provision. Next is like next few provisions are regarding preventive detention laws only. No law providing for preventive detention shall authorize detention of a person for longer than 3 months. Now we all know that under preventive detention laws, what happens? Before commission of the crime, only a person is detained, only on the basis of a suspicion, right? That the person may commit a certain type of offenses and the person is arrested. Now what happens under preventive detention laws, it might be so that the, you know, like person is arrested and without any sort of trial or anything, the person is, you know, like just kept under custody for like months and years. So there is a need to fix a certain, you know, like time frame. So under clause 4 it says no law providing for preventive detention. That means there might be many legislations we have, right, regarding preventive detention. So what under whichever legislation, whichever preventive detention legislation the person is arrested, it is not authorized that person should be arrested for longer than 3 months. So if on the basis of suspicion a person is arrested, he cannot be arrested for longer than 3 months, or he cannot be, you know, like just detained longer than 3 months. In case the authorities feel that there is a need to, you know, like keep the person under custody for longer than 3 months, then there is a procedure that they need to follow. What it is? That an advisory body consisting of person who are or have been qualifiedly appointed by judges of the High Court as reported. So there would be what? There would be an advisory body would be formed, and they would refer it to the advisory body before expiry of this 3 months period. and they would mention on what ground they want to detain the person for longer than this particular thing, and he may be detained for a maximum, like the person may be detained beyond the 3 months period if the advisory committee is satisfied that there is enough reasons for detaining the person beyond that particular period. So similarly, communication regarding the grounds of arrest are also necessary. Disclosure of facts are also necessary. And this is all regarding the how the advisory, board would be approached for arrest of a person or detention of a person longer than 3 months, or what would be the procedure and all of that. So basically, Article 22 is what it is regarding arrest and detention, and the previous article that we saw was regarding conviction for any type of offenses under Article 20. So these two are like different articles providing for different types of rights. Now there is a famous case, D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal. Why this case is very important is this particular case was filed, saying that rights of the person who are under custody, their rights are being violated a lot. There are many custodial deaths also that are taking place. They are not provided with sufficient rights and all of that. So these things were mentioned under this particular case. So what the court said is that court passed certain guidelines. Okay, a lot of guidelines were issued in this particular case, and they divided these guidelines on various grounds under trial prisoners who for whom it is decided that the person has who is serving a sentence or any type of punishment. So various types of rights were given to all those persons. It was said that, for example, when a person is arrested, he should be informed about the grounds of his arrest. Once he is arrested, he should be allowed at least to make one phone call just to inform his friends or family members regarding the arrest. He should be, given timely medical checkups. All of those rights were given to the person who are, under custody. So this is a famous case that you can refer. So if you want, I can just, give a writing of the basic guidelines that were issued on this particular case and what this case was all about. So I can do that so that you can read it from here. So any doubts on these rights, right to equality that we right to freedom, these freedoms that we discussed today? Any questions on these freedoms? Anyone, any point is not clear or anything? Any questions? If it's clear, you can tell it's clear. If not, you can just tell me what is not clear. Any point is not clear? It's cleared, ma'am. Okay. Fine then. So we will look at some of the questions. So what would be the answer for this first question? So these questions are basically from the freedom part, the rights that we discussed today. So which of the following rights is a constitutional right and not a fundamental right?
Right to property means.
Yes, it is right to property. So under which article right to property was given originally?
Originally, 21.
Yeah, originally it was 19 clause 1 clause F, and now we have it like a constitutional right under 300A, and it was the 42nd Amendment Act, that 44th Amendment Act of 1978, which removed it from from fundamental rights and made it just a constitutional right. So it is right to property. So you can try to remember the article. It is 300A. Next one.
Right to vote.
Yeah, so
Right to vote.
yeah, so right against self-incrimination, we have under which article? This is under Article 20. Then we have free and compulsory education under Article 21A, ex post facto laws also we have, right? So it is right to vote, which is not it is not included under the fundamental rights. So it will be right to vote. So right against ex post facto laws is also under Article 20, that a person cannot be convicted of a certain thing which is not an offense at that moment, or which is cannot be given a punishment more than what is mentioned under law. So Ananya Kumar, you have raised your hand. Any doubt, or is it by mistake?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's related to right to expression and freedom of speech. So my
Okay.
question is, like, these many YouTubers are, like Carrie Minati right now, used abusive language. Can he seek remedy under freedom of speech and freedom of expression?
Yeah, so freedom of speech and expression again is not like absolute right? There might be certain restrictions that are mentioned under Article 2. So if it is whatever the person is doing, if it is affecting like public order, or if it is affecting decency or morality that we have, then we can file a case on those grounds. Or if it is like defamation on some person, whatever comments they are making, whatever videos they are making, if it is like a sort of defamation on a person, the person can file a case. If normally we feel that it is affecting decency or morality, then also the person can file a case. Even for those kind of cases, what happens is that you would see that many of the videos are like pulled down by YouTube itself, that it is affecting decency or morality, or it is like hampering public order. So on those grounds, even YouTube itself is pulling down videos. So those also you can say. And also if a person is like specifically affected or something, he can also file a case that whatever things they are mentioning, it is a type of like defamatory statement, or it is affecting decency or something like that.
Okay, and politicians, if they are like using some defamatory language in their speeches, so can they be booked under?
Yeah, so say now again, politicians trying to convince that they are the best, they would use certain things which are like very common for us as a general public also. Now something if they are saying which is like extremely defamatory or something, the other party files a case. If they cannot prove that whatever they have said is true, then they can be booked, case. They will have to face the consequences. For example, if a person says that the current government is they are not very loyal, they are just taking public's money or something, then they can prove that why they are not taking public money or something like that. If the other party can prove their point why they have said that present government is not honest or something, like it depends on the type of arguments given by both the parties. If they can prove that whatever is said is completely false and is defamatory, the person may have to face consequences. And also it should be like incitement to an offense, right? For example, if a person is saying like the present government what we have is not like very good one, so what we should do is that we should remove them from seat in the coming election. So if one person is saying like that in a speech, that is not inciting for any offense, right? That is just a general statement that is made, and people are people are convinced that by using our right to vote, we should remove them from power, which is like a legal thing to do. So those things are allowed. Like a person can go and say that we should remove this particular political party, they are like very like not properly doing it. So that would not be an incitement to an offense. But if they are saying that this political party is not good, we would go against them, do some revolt, those things would be like a different thing. So next, yeah. So next one, the power to impose reasonable restrictions on fundamental rights is given to whom? Who is been given this particular power to, impose reasonable restrictions on the rights that are given? Parliament. Yeah, it is the Parliament who can impose certain reasonable restrictions on any of the grounds that are mentioned. So these were like the questions that we had from this part. So I will try to make a note on the DK Basu case and what was basically held on this particular case, so that you can read it from here itself, that what all guidelines were issued and what happened after this particular decision and why the case was actually filed. So this is all about the various types of freedoms that we have under the Constitution of India. And next we will discuss the other types of rights, that is right against exploitation, in next class. So meanwhile you can just go through the articles, okay, what articles is saying about what, because from part 3, part 4 you can expect questions on the article basis. And regarding the cases also, you can just read the cases from here. It would be like very clear to you what was the matter all about in this particular case. Okay then, so we'll end this class here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.